You are watching or listening to Purham and Associates. For more information, go to rpurham.com or follow me on all social media platforms and subscribe at RPURHAM. Thanks. See you over there. Hey, good day to you all. Welcome to Purham and Associates. I'm your host, Randy Purham. Hey, it's a terrific Tuesday. This is mid-stroke of the week, almost, and there's a lot going on and a lot to talk about. But we're gonna tailor it down a little bit and talk about some key highlights that happened over the last few days with a very special guest, returning guest. Y'all know who he is. See, he is what I would say the premier law enforcement guy of the United States. Never mind what the media would tell you, Tom Homan and all those jokers and Cash Patel. Now this is the guy right here. So we got none other than Michael Letts. He is the founder and president and CEO of InVest USA, a national grassroots nonprofit organization that is helping hundreds of communities provide thousands of bulletproof vests for their police forces through educational, public relations, sponsorship, and fundraising programs. He also has over 30 years of law enforcement experience under his belt. Hence, his pro police stands for his brothers and sisters in blue. Those interested in learning more about Letts can visit his official website at investusa.org. Ladies and gentlemen, introduce some and present the others, Mr. Michael Letts. Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Well, good morning, Randy. It's always a privilege to be with you. We thank you for the opportunity. And as you mentioned in the intro, so much going on in our country. We're fighting for our survival, and I still believe we have great opportunity to make this nation thrive. But boy, I'll tell you what, we're being tried. That's for sure, Randy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely being tried. That's the best way to put it. Best word to put there is we're being tried. And what's interesting to me is that every time I turn on the news now, it seems like it's opening up with a headline of some mass shooting or some attempted mass shooting somewhere in the country, and it is being pointed to the left. And it's just like, what is wrong with these folks? They're like just super deranged. And we had, even outside of that, we had a mass shooting down in Louisiana, a tragic one at that. Father of 7, but killed 8. He killed all 7 of his kids. It's like, that is unthinkable. It's just like, what is going on here? You got caught up in an affair from what the story is shaking out to. Had an affair and baby mama drama and mama drama, and you just and it's just like you decided to take it out on the kids. It's just like what's going on there. But talk to us about that, Mike, if you will.
Well, here's what's interesting in that particular situation in Shreveport. Of course, he killed his 7. The 8th one child that he killed was a cousin. So they're all in the family. Mm-hmm. But here's, as you said, it was a domestic violence situation. Of course, the issue was, as you talked about, we have another woman in the picture.
Yeah.
But that having been said, that agency had been called out numerous times for domestic violence in that particular area. So right now, you've automatically got a red flag. Domestic violence are some of the toughest calls we encounter in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And why is that? Because the law has been changed now in every state. We're called out for domestic violence, and we can see any evidence of some kind of altercation. The woman's got, forget a bruise, just got a red mark, on an arm, or the guy has, a scratch. If we can find anything she seems to show an altercation, somebody has to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is you get there, you calm things down. Now law enforcement president, they're realizing they got to get off their high horse. They're trying to start communicating, work things out. Then they suddenly both of them are smiling. Okay, we're good. Thank you for coming. Well, no, we're not done yet. There seems to be some altercation here. And then, of course, the dad went, oh, no. Well, the evidence is there. The law requires that I take, somebody in. And boy, didn't they get really defensive? They get really upset. You're not taking my spouse in.
Yeah.
And suddenly you got both of them that turn on you. You're now the bad guy.
Yeah.
And, man, they're wearing you out for everything they're worth. And that's why there's such dangerous calls to begin with. But in this situation, so you've been called out numerous times for domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you follow his record, he was in the Guard. He had been discharged from the Guard because he had been convicted. Not discharged, he'd been convicted of use of a deadly weapon on a road rage. Mm-hmm. And here was what the situation that happened. He got into a dispute, a road rage issue, stopped at a traffic light, pulled his sidearm, shot 5 times. What really makes this thing tragic, Randy, is they were sitting in front of a school, and they were out playing in recess. So any one of those could have easily have hit a kid. Didn't, fortunately for him, but it just goes to show you that he can't control his temper.
Yeah.
Yet none of that was taken into account to make sure that he was either being treated mentally for his situation, or that we kept firearms away from him. I'm the strongest proponent of the Second Amendment. Yeah. Sometimes there are some people that don't deserve to have a firearm, and we ignored all those red flags, and you saw what happened. He snapped.
Yeah.
And when he snapped to the degree that he killed all 8 of his kids. 7 of his kids and the one cousin, and shot the wife, the girlfriend, shot another guy that was trying to get out, and unfortunately those 3 survived. They're recuperating. But here's the other thing you have to think about, Randy. Is not only as tragic as that was, the first responders coming up on the scene. Imagine seeing a 3-year-old kid that's been execution style.
Yeah.
I mean, that leaves such a traumatic
imaging,
PTSD on those kids that it's just, on the first responders. And that's something we haven't really addressed. We've got to start talking about in our law enforcement system nationally. How do we prevent some of these things from happening? Well, let's talk for just a second. You've got an increase by 26% in what we call mass shootings in the last few years.
Yeah.
He said, I thought crime was going down. Overall crime, homicides are the lowest they've ever been. It's going way down overall. But in one category, mass shootings, they're up. What is a mass shooting? Anytime you have an assailant that kills 2 or more at the same time. Okay? So what are most of these mass killings we're talking about? We're talking about like the school shootings. You remember the one in Tennessee, are all over the place where people come in and shoot up a bunch of kids. And here's what we found, Randy. I think we even discussed it on your show before. These are mentally deranged people. Many of them are a lot of them are transgenders. You say, you picking on a group? Here's the group I'm picking on. Transgenderism, they give them hormones, okay? To try to change, who they are. And anybody that's been in athletics can relate to this. You talk about athletes, especially in strength. You remember I was a weightlifting champion, and in strength sports, steroids give you what they call road rage. Roid rage. Excuse me. You can see.
Yep, road rage. Yep.
It's because it affects the balance of your hormones. So here you've got all these transgenders being given hormones that are taking them over the edge. But then they're taking it out on people around them, schools, kids, etc., killings left and right. Yeah. And yet we're not addressing that as a nation. Transgenderism is a big enough issue on its own. But I can tell you this, to allow them to have possession and access to firearms when they are emotionally unstable, it's just a recipe for disaster. And the same thing we're talking about with Shreveport. When and here's one of the things you say, well, what can we do about this? We don't do this now, shockingly, but whenever, I'm not concerned about somebody that's been indicted, because in this country, you're innocent till proven guilty.
Yep.
But somebody that's been convicted and has served time before you're released, we should be doing a mental health screening on every inmate that's released.
Yes.
And if you come across issues like we're talking about here in Shreveport, that this guy's got real anger issues, and I mean, he's got problems in the past, domestic violence, et cetera, et cetera. We need to be monitoring those situations, and furthermore, I don't think they should have access to firearms for those kind of people. The same as I'm talking about with transgenders that are on hormonal medication. We've got to do a better job, or you're going to continue to see more and more of this escalate.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mike. And I'm baffled at the fact that we have gotten away from having insane asylums. Just nut
Right.
houses, crazy houses, whatever you want to call them, mental institutions. Fine, if we want to be politically correct. we gotten away from having those, and you're hard pressed to find. You may find one in a state, but you just don't hear about them. If they do exist, you don't hear about it. Nobody talks about sending people there. But if we ramp that up and said, you know what, okay, we have this population of people that are just batshit crazy. We're going to put them in a mental institution for X number of years. It's just like being sentenced to jail. It's like, okay, you got you're acting crazy, you're doing this and the third. The minimum for this offense that you did because you're crazy, quote unquote, you're getting 5 years. They'd be like, oh man, let me straighten up and let me act right. I think that a threat of being locked up in a mental institution to people, that will change course on people starting to act right. That's my personal belief, and I think that will.
No, I think
that
you're
will work.
exactly right, Randy.
Yeah.
In fact, to validate what you're saying, back in the 80s, I mean, almost every town had at least one.
Yep.
If
Exactly. Yep.
they called them like I remember in South Carolina. I don't know what in the rest of the country. It was Charter River medical facility, something along those lines. And you would see them all over the place, and that's what they were. They were mental health facilities. But what happened? Well, the media. I love how the media just destroys everything they touch.
Oh my God.
The media got into saying, "Oh, you're abusing people. They're sending people there that don't belong. It's a mental stigma being sent to one of those." And so they got scared of being sued. And they decided, you know what, it's probably best if we just get out of this business. Now look at what we got. We're just out on the street. Nobody's taking care of them. They're killing innocent civilians. And we've got a real mess, Randy. We really do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of the hospitals and stuff, up in Chicago a couple of days ago, 2 cops were shot. One was killed because they was transporting, an inmate to the hospital, and somehow he whipped around and snatched up one of their guns and and commenced a shooting. It's those things like that. I'm not gonna say it was complacency involved there because it was a routine thing that they did, but I will argue that it goes to show that the mentality of these people today, you can't be in a place of complacency. Nothing is you should see nothing as routine with when you're dealing with people today. And so it's just like, okay,
That's right.
keep
There's
them,
a real issue with mental health.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy to me. It's shocking that the way people are going about mental health issues is we just talk about it and we throw money at it, but we're not actually producing programs or any kind of actual path to solving the issue. And to me,
Well, the problem, Randy,
it's crazy.
is what you and I just alluded to. For generations, and especially on the Democrat, the leftist side, they want to be politically correct.
Yeah.
So let's be non-offensive. Well, it's offensive to talk about you might not be altogether mentally, even though that's the truth. We don't want to say it.
Yeah.
So we certainly don't want to support anything that would bring that further into light, i.e. mental institutions, et cetera, et cetera. So what do? To be politically correct, we just eliminate them, and then it becomes the problem that it's always been, which is much further than anything else. And people now begin to pay the price and die because we haven't done anything to address the problem.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I talk to us about how do we solve that? How do we? What's a course of action that people listening today that they can take to address this issue? Because I know there's a lot of listeners today that have family members, friends that they know is not all there, don't have all their marbles,
Right.
all the lights are not on in the hallway, whatever you want to call it. We all know these people. What can we start doing legally, that is, to start addressing these problems. Because that's I always say, it starts with us. Before we start
Well,
pointing to
no
the
question.
government and everything else, it starts with us. So what can we? What's some ideas that you have there, Mike?
Well, first and foremost is, and we have to factor this in. Let's take a look at history. Let's look at what worked in the past. In the past, we promoted faith and houses of worship.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you say we don't do that anymore. Well, let me just give you an example. In the olden days, every department had a chaplain. We paid chaplains.
Oh yeah.
The military still does. We have chaplains. Do you realize now how few departments have chaplains anymore?
Mm-hmm.
You say, why is that? Because the leftist liberal suddenly began to raise their ugly head like they always do. Oh, we don't do, there's a separation of church and state. We don't talk about religion. So you certainly can't hire chaplains. And so you see, you begin to put a negative perception on chaplains and faith. Well, faith is a key part of maintaining mental health and balance. I hate to tell people that, but that's the truth. I mean, when you're doing nefarious activities because you have no values and you have no faith, your mental health is going to get skewed. I mean, I can just guarantee it's a principle that applies every time. So you ask, what are some solutions? The first thing is we need to get back to viewing what works. And houses of worship, faith is a key component to mental health. Mm-hmm. So instead of being critical, we need to be supportive of our faith and of our houses of worship. And houses of worship need to take a proactive stance once again and teach the truth instead of trying to be social clubs.
Oh, thank you for saying that. That's
a whole other issue.
It's a whole other show.
but you add for a solution, that's the first.
Yes, you're right.
Second thing we can do as a society is to try to destigmatize the issue that we're working on. You say, well, what do I mean by that? Well, let's talk about law enforcement. Let's talk about military operations. We know for a fact PTSD is not something we came up with because we had nothing better to do. It stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, which we know that causes, that kind of stress, seeing that kind of either combat experience or dealing with the worst of the worst day in and day out, causes a stress level that creates a change in your DNA. We've actually been able to document that now. And so we need to make sure that we are providing adequate counseling and mental assistance to those who experience that. Why don't we? Well, we got back to the same issue we talked about with faith. Once again, the media, well, you don't want to go talk to the mental health counselor advisor in the department. Somebody finds out, they say you're crazy. They'll take your badge away, they'll take your gun away, they'll kick you to the... We created a situation that wasn't there. Yeah. And so we need to start reversing that by saying, you know what, part of being in law enforcement, part about being a first responder, even a firefighter, EMS worker, part about being in the military is we experience situations that cause tremendous mental stress.
I was just going to say that. Yes, you're absolutely right.
And we recognize that. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's just the way it is. But we're going to do something to help fix it. And once people start feeling more comfortable, that, well, that's not a negative term. That's part of the job. It's part of what we do. I think you'll begin to see an attitude change in society that, these are just issues that we need to be talking about instead of being ashamed of. Right. I think that's critical. And, of course, the third and final component is you got to provide the services. Yep. It's interesting to me that we can, under the liberal philosophy, we can waste trillions of your dollars by giving people, illegal immigrants, people who don't even deserve it, lodging, housing, cars, you name it. But we can't take care of the people who have provided so much for our state and our country.
Mind blowing.
I mean, boom. It's just, I appreciate what you just said, Randy. It's mind blowing. Somebody volunteers, I'm going to defend you, whether it's on the streets as a cop or whether it's on a battlefield in Afghanistan. I'm willing to put my life at risk to make sure you stay free. And this is the thanks we give them. You go sleep in the street, or you're nutty. We don't even want to give you an opportunity when you get back for what you do. Yeah. However, this poor person that has tried to make a better life for themselves by violating our law, crossing illegally, running drugs while they're doing it, we're going to pour out the red carpet for them. We give them whatever they want.
whatever you
Randy,
want.
something's really wrong with our society when we do that.
I agree, and and thank you for pointing that out, because I see it, here in Austin all the time. It's just like, you cannot you can't pull up to a traffic light in Austin without a homeless camp or a homeless person standing in the middle of the street, like quite literally, begging for, change, tapping on your window, asking you if you have a cigarette. It's like, why are we in this? Why do we have this? Like, why does this exist? And you got the cops that sit right over there. They just just chilling, and it's just like, yeah, this is Austin, whatever. But it's not just relegated to Austin. It's all over the country now, and we've normalized the fact of this is just a component of our society that exists. We're not going to do anything about it unless something happens. We're not implementing any preventive measures to prevent these things from happening or to even address it. And it's creating this havoc that, people are innocently getting killed, people are being harassed, people are being, just threatened, whatever the case is. And we could do something about it, but we just opt not to because of the stigmas that's incorporated with that. And to that point, you're right. In the military, especially when I was in, you couldn't go to mental health because that was like a death sentence. Your career was done. You with the mental health.
Still like that, Randy.
It still is like that. Yes, you go to mental health, and it's like, you sure you want? Are you sure you're feeling that way? They give you those leading questions. You sure you want to do that? Are you sure you want? You like, never mind. I was just coming to get some information. I'll talk to y'all later. Hey,
same things happen with law enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, you do that. What's the first question?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should take your gun, and maybe you should go home for a couple months, not a couple days, a couple months.
Yep.
Let's make sure that you're okay before we put you back out on the street.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to go through that stigma.
Right. And the thing with that is, in these kind of professions, first responders, military, we see traumatic stuff all the time. And to your point, we learn to deal with it, and cope with it and everything else. Yes, it may be, some of us can't really mentally handle it 100%, but you still have that capacity to recognize, like, okay, I got an issue. I don't want to see that right now. It's going to trigger me, so let me just step away. But we handle that. But the rest of society, they see us, coping with that. And it's a label, it's a stigma. Oh, we don't want them working for us. We don't want them around us. We don't want, that's y'all need to go over there, type of thing. And this is what leads to the homelessness. This is leading to people being mentally ill because there is no reception of the fact that this is a normal thing. So, hey, let me help you. What you need. You need to talk it out. You need to walk it out. You need to, take a 10-minute break. We don't do any of that, and so it's just crazy to me.
I think what the biggest slap in the face, Randy, is you have people that are willing to literally put their lives on the line, sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Scripture says, "Greater love have no end than this, that you're willing to lay down your life for your friend." They're willing to do that, and yet this is the thanks this country gives.
Yep.
I mean, that's something really wrong there, Randy. Really wrong.
I would say our government has a mental issue. I
would agree.
That's the problem. We're talking about humans, but our government has enshrined mental illness in itself, in its policies and everything else. And I want to turn our attention to the domestic terrorism side of the house. We got these kids in high school and college that are now going out, trying to commit, acts of terrorism, whether it's against synagogues, against the Jewish community, or whether it's at, they go to a protest somewhere. And you see what happened in New York with those two guys up there. The girl, the high school girl here in Texas, who attempted to go and attack a synagogue again. Type of thing. So we got these kids now. Never mind the adults. The adults is already the problem, but we got kids now coming up and trying to be terrorists in the U.S. I want to get your thoughts on what mitigating factors do we have aside from closing the schools and getting rid of teachers, because the teachers are the problem these days. They most of them are. They're
Yeah.
indoctrinating these kids. They're feeding this stuff into their heads, and they're going home and they're regurgitating this information that they learned from this teacher. And we had this problem here in Texas as well. That the teachers unions. We gotten away from PTAs and PTOs. All that stuff is just gone out the window. You can't even go to the school and check on your kid these days. So I want to get your thoughts on how we address this segment of society now.
Well, it's twofold. First of all, what you just said is so accurate, Randy.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have an attitude in education that those are not your kids; they're our kids. All about the government. We're responsible for them. We'll train it. We're going to tell them what to do. If you get in the way, we're going to lock you up.
Mm-hmm.
Since when did we ever decide that your kids are now wards of the state? That is the biggest misconception, and we need to address that in policy and beat it down every time its ugly head comes about anywhere across this country. Teachers' unions and our educational system, because you're right. Just take a look at what happened over the weekend with the assassination attempt on the president.
Yeah.
This guy's a teacher.
Exactly.
And he's not the only one. I mean, and what you said, Randy, is so accurate. They don't just keep it to themselves, okay? They're in the classroom with all these young kids expressing their venom, their hatred for conservative values, principles, for politics, etc. And these kids are just soaking it up like a sponge.
Yeah.
So instead of teaching them what they're supposed to, reading, writing, and arithmetic, as we used to say in the old days, they're teaching them philosophy and hatred.
Yeah.
And they're graduating. They don't have any middle skills helpful to society. That's the only thing they have. They're graduating full of hate and venom and looking for revenge, retribution, and looking for a handout, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And
That's great.
so the first thing we have to do is we have to change our policies within government as to how we're addressing that. Now, this is a twofold question that you asked, because you can't just deal with the education unless you've got an alternative, somebody to pick up the slack. Well, let's go back to history. How was this country so successful for so many hundreds of years? Because before we really got into times of World War II and shortly thereafter, the parents, the home, the father was in charge of the education of his kids.
Yeah.
You say, well, how could he be educating his kids and work at the same time? I didn't say he was the one teaching them. He was in charge of their education.
Yep.
They did a number of things back then. They all said, okay, there's 15 families in this community. We're going to all figure out how to get together and, the parents, the fathers especially, what are we going to teach them? Well, one thing we're going to teach them, not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, we're going to teach them values and principles.
Yep.
Who's going to do that? Where can we meet? Oh, the churches. You had a church on every corner. Churches have great facilities. We'll use the church facilities during the week because they're not being used. And we'll take our children there and we'll make sure that we hire somebody who we have screened. We know what they're going to be teaching. We're watching out for the curriculum. They were heavily involved.
Yes.
What do we have nowadays? What has the government been able to do? They said, Randy, you don't need to mess with all that junk with your kids. You got other more important things to do. You need to work a second job. You could be driving that bigger car, or you can have that boat you've always wanted to have.
Yep.
So don't worry about it. We'll take care of your kids for you. Isn't that a great blessing? We're going to take them off your hands 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Well, they didn't bother to tell you that. Part of that deal was they now think they're in charge. That they've got to go, we're going to educate them the way we think they should be educated, with the philosophy, values that we want to instill, and we've lost control over our own families.
Yes.
And that's why this is two things that have to be done.
Yeah.
We have to recognize that.
Absolutely.
What's more important to you, Randy? Reading out on the lake on that boat, and then having kids that are shooting each other and end up in prison or shooting you? Or maybe not being able to be on the boat, and I'm not saying anything wrong with being on the boat, but having kids that you're proud of.
Yeah.
That make society proud. And that make your retirement proud. And that stand with you and know how to have values and principles. We have to have these kind of discussions.
Yeah, I'm a long-term thinker, Mike. So, I want my kids to be successful. So when I'm old and great, I'm ready to get on the boat. They're successful enough to where they can pay for it and say, in terms of, gratitude and thanking me for allowing them to be, who they are. So that's how I look at it. But a lot of parents, they're like, I had you. Now get out my house and go
Yeah,
figure it out.
you're an
And that's
inconvenience.
that's the mentality we're in now, and it's unfortunate. And you're right. You know, these parents send their kids to school with the expectation versus the reality. They're sending the kids to school with the expectation of they're getting an education and they're being taught the right things and being instilled with something that's going to make them a productive member of society. But when they come home, they got BLM posters in their room. They got pride flags hanging up everywhere, and the parents are
Yep.
like, what's going on? And the kids like, oh, this is what we're learning in school. And parents like, whatever, because they're stuck with the mentality of this must be the new curriculum that they're teaching
Right.
these kids versus, oh hell no, you're not going to learn this in this not with this stuff. No, we're not doing that. They're not doing that, and so I think the problem is that parents are refusing to show up to these school board meetings.
Right.
They're checking the box on election day, for these school board members, and not doing a background check, not doing the research on them.
They don't even know who
And
they're checking.
exactly, they don't know anything. They just see a name, and the name sounds good, and they're like, okay, sure, whatever. And it's the most radicalist, craziest person you could find. And now
Yeah.
they're in charge of writing the curriculum and teaching these kids and everything else, and being administrators, making a six-figure salary, demanding that your taxes are raised through the city
Correct.
council so they can have a fatter paycheck, and your kids are coming out corrupt, stupid, and incompatible with the rest of society. So this is what we got now. And
Yeah.
people get mad. People get mad at me. They call me or they send me an email or text me and say you're wrong for saying that. But where's the lie? This is the product of what we have. This is what's going
You
on
hit
out
the
here.
nail on the head. You hit the nail on the head, Randy. And I mean, here's what I want our listeners to understand. You're setting the stage for the next generation.
Yeah.
So don't be surprised when the next generation comes when you say, what in the world happened to this country?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
It's your fault.
I'll tell you what happened to you. You planned it that way. You reaping what you sow.
So
And that's exactly what happened in this country. That's the problem. We're in the mess we are in right now, Randy.
yeah, yeah. I want to touch on the White House Correspondents' Dinner. That shooter, Thomas Allen Cole Thomas Allen.
Right.
This guy, you're right. He is not the only one. There's probably dozens of teachers because we see it all the time. With these protests, we have teachers. As a matter of fact, the No Kings protest. We just had a stint of where a bunch of high school kids, some even middle school kids, were out protesting. They let them out of school to go protest, and teachers are standing there with them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not an isolated incident. This was not a lone wolf attack. He just so happened to be the only one that was caught, and so
That's correct.
and so I'm just baffled that nobody's connecting the dots here. Nobody's looking at this, and I would encourage the FBI or DHS, even Department of Homeland Security, to start looking at these networks of teachers and what they're doing inside the classroom and outside the classroom. I hate to say they need to be under surveillance and all that, but look at what's going on. If they're already boldly encouraging kids to do these things, just imagine how they're planning it, what they're doing, and all that. This is how you put a stop to it. But I digress, Mike. I'm gonna get your thoughts on that.
No, you're right. You hit the nail on the head. And to validate what you're saying, Randy, is remember you only get to see the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
But how many posts are out there today? We're going to make it applicable to today of educators whose comment about over the weekend is, "Gee, I hate that he couldn't complete the mission.
Yep.
Sorry, the president's still alive." All coming from educators, and we know that for a fact because they make sure that they put that in their post, and yet 9 out of 10 of them, nothing will happen to.
Yep. It's insane. It's insane. I don't know where we're going with this in society, and hopefully we have a path to correction sometime
Well, I
soon.
think we do have some proposals. One of the things InVest is doing is we're talking about instituting charter schools all across the country. You say, well, what's the difference? What do you mean by the charter school? First of all, it's tax paid, okay? But we're directing those tax dollars to an institution that sets its own curriculum and sets its own standards for values and principles. Now, how are we getting away with it? Well, right now, Randy, we have a national security crisis in this country. We don't have enough cops, and we're not anywhere near where we need to be. So how do we solve it? Well, you remember we did this with the nursing crisis situation. What we're proposing now is charter schools all across the country that for high schools at a minimum, that when you come in and you come in the ninth grade, hopefully no later than the 10th, when you graduate, you have your diploma, you have a 2-year associate degree, and you're certified in one of the tracks. Either you graduate as a Class 3 law enforcement officer, a firefighter, or an EMS, a paramedic. So when you grab your diploma in one hand, you can keep walking across the platform right over to the police station, firefighter station, the ambulance station, and get hired on immediately because we have a crisis of lack of jobs anyway, and be able to have a career if you choose, or at a minimum, you have a skill that you can utilize while you're pursuing other things and also giving back to society and being part of making our society stronger. That's key, because if you do this with the charter schools and we allow the track for first responders, we control the curriculum. And I guarantee you, I don't want a first responder that doesn't have values and principles. That's kind of dangerous to put a gun in somebody's hand if he doesn't have any values and principles to know what to do with. So we're insisting that our curriculum be the way it is. We have the charter school, federal legislation and state legislation across the country that allows that, allows charter schools to teach the curriculum. What's the trade-off? Is our students have to be able to take the standardized testing and show that they can pass the minimum standards, which isn't much, Randy, anymore. Same as anybody else does, and we're more than willing to accept that challenge.
That's awesome. I love that idea. You know, we are lacking, you know, not only law enforcement officers, but we're lacking, you know, skilled trade jobs as well.
That's
correct.
Know,
it's a whole nother conversation, folks, but you know, the H-1B, the visa programs and importing workers and overlooking American workers, that is a byproduct of our education system. You can't go into Microsoft or Dell or Samsung or Apple or, you know, Tesla even. You can't go into NASA and say, oh, I got a basket weaving degree or a gender studies degree, but I want to be your, you know, technical engineer on this spaceship. They'd be like, yeah, if you'll get your ass out of here. You know, so we're lacking the educational structure. Yeah, we got STEM programs in the United States. Yeah, we do. We have great ones, you know, but the path to get into those programs is lacking because they don't have the foundation necessary to get into those programs. So we have to import people from other countries to go to these schools and get trained up and utilize these programs in the United States. And now they're here and they take on the jobs and everything else because they was actually trained because they had the foundation. And people are like, and people don't understand the concept. They don't understand the pipeline of how all this is working. And I keep telling people, we have to address the education system. We have to address the curriculums that's being taught. Look at what's going on over in India. Look at what's going on in China. Look at what's going on in South Korea, Japan. Look at their curriculums. Look at what the kids are being taught over there. And then you say, okay, how can we be competitive and be, you know, part of the workforce that, you know, allows that? It's by changing our stuff. And so
exactly. I love what you alluded to, Randy, from this standpoint. It has to happen with us talking about parents now to change the system for the future.
Yes.
And I love what you said, Randy. I want to steal your idea from you. At least I'm telling you up front and ahead.
Sure thing.
We have to understand this very basic value and principle. Invest in your children. And that is how you invest in your future.
Yes.
And so the best thing to do to invest in your children is don't just say, I got rid of them for 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. I don't have to worry about it anymore. Is do what you can to help them succeed, to be the most educated, the most valued, to have the most principle. And you'll find out that it yields tenfold a result for you when you come to that point in your life to where you're winding down and they're just winding up.
Yep. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Mike, I know you got to get out of here. Tell people how they can follow you and support you, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, please go to investusa.org and support the programs there. But I'll let you tell the rest, Mike.
Well, thank you so much, Randy. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. If you go to our website, that's InVestUSA.org. It's a charity.org. Make a contribution to making sure these officers have the necessary equipment to come home safely to their families. I'm so pleased to be able to say that the tragedy that occurred over the weekend with the attempt on the president's life, the Secret Service officer that was caught in the middle, that was shot in the chest, he had on a new one of our active shooter vests, a new technology. Had he not have that on, he'd be dead today. And so they work, and they're valued, they're necessary. Our officers need to have them if they're going to have the morale to know that we care about them as they try to put their lives on the line to protect us. So do what you can, even if it's only $1. They need to know that you stand behind them. God bless you for what you're doing, Randy, for taking sure the truth is out there, and God bless America.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate you, Mike. As always, more than welcome to come back anytime. Give us some updates on what's going on. I know you got a plethora of stuff going on in your neck of the woods, so we're happy to have you back and give us updates. And you be safe out there.
God bless. Thank you so much, Randy.
Absolutely.
You take care.
You too. Talk to you soon. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Letts. Hey, once again, I'm going to throw the website there up at investusa.org. You can check that out. Like I said, they need contributions. So if you're in that position and you feel blessed by today's conversation, you could go and donate and help them out to get more vests into their organization, more funding to their programs that they have going on across the country, and to support, not only the communities out there that's in need, but also to support the law enforcement community. So I encourage you all to go do that and do make a difference. That's what it's all about. It's making a difference. And with that, folks, I'm gonna get up out of here. I start vacation in 2 days, so I will see y'all in a couple of weeks. Long overdue. So y'all be safe out there, and don't forget to go pick up the book, Polarizing America. It is available online and all that good stuff wherever you get your books and all that. And I will talk to y'all soon. Be safe. God bless, and ciao, ciao. I hope you enjoyed today's program. You can follow, like, share, subscribe on Spotify, Substack, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, and your news. And also, you can download Let the Truth Be Told app on your favorite streaming platforms, such as Fire Stick, Apple TV, and Roku. Take care. God bless.